I think we're on amendment number 4.
Yes. Okay. So again, we're on Senate Bill 414, Climate Solutions Now Act of 2021. These are the amendments from Senator Gallion, which appear beginning on the second page of your amendment packet. And just so everybody is aware, you do have the most recent reprint of the Climate Solutions Act with the amendments that were adopted on Wednesday sitting on your desk. Yes. One that says current posture 217.
Right.
So anyhow, amendment number 4 from Senator Gallion adds language requiring the state plan to take into consideration the impacts of achieving net zero emissions on the reliability of the electric grid, and prohibits the plan from including as an emissions reduction measure any requirement, including any offset requirement, that would negatively impact the reliability of the grid or the provision of reliable electric services to consumers. So this is would be on page 16 of the bill.
Is there a motion to put this amendment on the floor in front of us? Senator Gallion and Senator Riley, you want to speak to it? Senator Gallion?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've heard a lot of talking on the floor and a little bit in here about the recent events in Texas, but I'm not here to debate those recent events, whether it was alternative energy sources or gas lines that failed. I'm here to discuss the reality here in Maryland. The PJM electric grid, which Maryland is a part of, is completely different than the Texas grid. What I am bringing forward is an amendment that allows the department and policymakers to look at the electric grid as a whole going forward and to ensure reliability standards are being met and taken into account as we move forward to reduce our state's carbon footprint. As I mentioned the other day, I have Wildcat Point in my district that just came online in 2018, and it has been praised by the state and the regional PJM market for supplying reliable baseload energy. This Old Dominion Electric Co-op, a not-for-profit energy generation cooperative, which owns and operates Wildcat Point, just recently announced their own goal to become net zero carbon emissions by 2050. So, in synopsis, the purpose of this amendment is that a final plan must be developed to consider, and that's a key word, consider the reliability of the grid, and may not include a measure that would hamper the reliability of the grid for customers.
Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to speak in strong support of this amendment. First of all, I think it's what our constituents expect. And again, we're Maryland, not other states, but I know my constituents, and I think statewide, have this expectation of the reliability of the electric grid. And quite frankly, it should be concerning if we don't put something like this in there, what we would be facing as far as lawsuits and liability issues. So I think this is I think it's a common sense amendment, focusing on the reliability and giving some consumer confidence. So I would urge my colleagues to support it.
Okay, let me mention 3 quick items. Senator, you brought up Texas, and you said you didn't want to talk about Texas, but you brought up Texas. Every media outlet has said it's because of the natural gas lines to creating energy froze. It had nothing to do with solar. It had nothing to do with wind. Maybe Rush Limbaugh has said it's related, but every media outlet has confirmed that it's.
He died.
I understand that. Every media outlet has confirmed that it was the pipes that are coming into or out of the natural gas and other facilities like that. So we can raise Texas and California, but the facts don't speak that way. That's number one. Number two, you mentioned the plant in your district calling for 2050, which was an amendment that was defeated earlier this week or last week. It all runs together. 2 hours ago, the Secretary of the Environment came out with the administration's plan that calls for net neutral by 2045. That's your secretary and our Secretary of the Environment. And finally, nothing in the bill talks about shutting off any company, any facility. There's nothing in the bill that does that. It calls for us achieving a 60% clean energy or a 60% reduction in greenhouse gases with a checkpoint, a sunset in 5 years. So already PSC addresses this issue. I think it can only be added to reduce the effectiveness of our push to have cleaner energy, more energy efficiency, and try to strive forward to address climate change. So I would encourage people to vote red or no on the bill, on the amendment. Please.
So first, when talking about Texas, I mentioned that we had talked about this on the floor, and I clearly said that Maryland is completely different. So that was the point I was trying to make. I wasn't trying to say, well, this one's doing this right or wrong. So I just want to make that clear. And second of all, God rest his soul, Rush Limbaugh passed away, so I couldn't have heard anything from him the last couple of days.
Right. Roll call on the Gallion Amendment number 4. Senator Carrozza.
In follow-up to the comments that you just made, it still wouldn't preclude us from going ahead and looking at this in order to have a safeguard so we can have some confidence in the reliability of the electric grid. So I hear your points, but to me, it would be, why wouldn't we take this into consideration?
Well, the Public Service Commission already does this. So I think putting it here will have other undercurrents, if you will, since we're talking electricity. So I'm against it, that's all. I mean, you can be for it, and we'll take a roll call. Madam Assistant. On the amendment number 4, Gallion Amendment. Okay, the amendment received 4 in favor, 7 against. It is defeated. Let's go to amendment number 5.
Amendment number 5, which adds language on page 50 of the bill, adds language to change, or to the charge of the Commission on Tree Plantings to specify that the plan they develop should emphasize expanding the capacity of existing state programs.
Could either committee counsel or the sponsor explain the implications of the amendment? I just want to understand it. Senator Gallion, can you just explain to me and the committee what are the implications of your amendment number 5? What does it do concretely to the state policy or the bill, proposed bill?
Which page was I only had 4 on my list that I had actually offered. I'm kind of.
The voting list number 11 on page 3.
Can I?
Yeah, you're not required to advance it, but obviously it was on the list, so I just wanted to give you an opportunity.
Right, and this might have been, there was a little bit of back and forth between me and your aide about, he had requested, he said it was maybe more of a conceptual amendment to specify that the tree plantings should be focusing on planting trees through existing state programs rather than kind of duplicating effort. So I don't know.
My understanding, though, after we did a little further research that one of the chairman's amendments kind of clarified that's how it's going to be done anyway, right?
Correct.
Through existing.
It's through both, and
So basically, the only thing that the bill would change would be to add a like this coordinator level, and then with 13 positions under that, correct?
so basically the bill right now, it directs more funding and resources to existing programs. It adds the coordinator position in the Department of the Environment. The only new tree planting program that it creates is the urban tree program in the Chesapeake Bay Trust. And then it sets up the commission to sort of look more broadly, but it's in there that one of the things that they should be looking at is the capacity of existing programs to handle the additional plantings that would need to occur to get to the 5 million goal.
Okay. I still want to kind of look at this a little. I won't offer that one this time, but something we feel important enough, I'll offer it on the floor. Thank you.
Well, he's not offering it now.
I just wanted to ask when April was going through the revised language on tree planting, where that was in the reprint?
Well,
Senator
not been
Gallion
it's
said
not, he's withdrawn it for now, Senator.
No, I understand. I was just trying to understand. Senator Gallion said that he thought Chair Pinsky's amendment addressed this concern because a lot of us want to make sure we're maximizing the existing state program. So I was trying to see when you said it was already covered, I was trying to find it in the reprint.
The conversations that we had were about the bill, both as originally introduced, was already the only new things that it creates is the new coordinator position in MDE and the new Chesapeake Bay Trust Urban Trees Program. Other than that, it's just directing resources to existing programs. There was some clarifying language added through Pinsky's amendments that.
I was just looking for that language.
So the only clarifying amendments to the tree program provisions in Pinsky's language have to do with authorizing or clarifying that money can be used for tree maintenance under, I think, the 2010 trust fund. But
Senator, already it goes to the Chesapeake Bay Trust that handles a lot of this. It's giving them more money and setting up a new program within Chesapeake Bay Trust to deal with the urban focus that we're adding 10% of the trees. So I think that's what Senator Gallion and I were talking about.
Okay.
Senator Riley, again, I don't want to talk about something that's not before us.
Real quick, if I may.
Sure.
Thank you. On page 46, the top of the page, it says determined by the department. Is that MDE?
wait, so page 46.
46, first line? Which department?
Yes.
MDE?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
And Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, the 5 million trees include Chesapeake Bay, Chesapeake and Atlantic Coast, Maryland Department of Agriculture. It's an aggregation of our current plus whatever new program the coordinator and his 13 staff might come up with. Yeah.
Right, so the 5 million trees goal, and it's on top of what would be projected to be planted under those existing programs on a business as usual standpoint. But the tree plantings themselves, those 5 million trees, most of them, at least as the bill is right now, would be happening through existing programs and initiatives. So the bill, to get to that 5 million trees goal, directs additional funding and resources to those provisions. So those 12 contractor provisions, they're not actually under the tree coordinator, they're actually in the DNR Forest Service. But their role would be specifically to sort of help support these efforts to get up to the 5 million trees.
All right, so again, just to clarify, we have a certain level of tree planting that's occurring, and we want to put an extra 5 million on top.
That's
Thank you,
the
Mr.
goal.
Chair.
The next set of amendments, I believe, at least in the packets, Senator Simon Ayers are next.
Correct. So Senator Simon Ayers' amendment, this is amendment number 974433/1, beginning on page 4 of the voting packet. This amendment would strike provisions in the bill dealing with high-performance buildings, both in relation to schools and to other state buildings, the environmental justice and reporting on the percentage of state greenhouse gas emissions reduction funding benefiting disproportionately affected communities, energy conservation requirements for utility companies under the Empower program, and zero-emission vehicles and buses.
Is there a motion to move the amendment? Senator Simon Ayer will move it. Senator Riley will second the motion. Senator Simon Ayer, you want to speak to it?
Thank you, and I apologize that you printed out the whole reprint on those killing some trees. Yeah. Yeah, I saw it was reprinted last time. I didn't expect that. But anyway, so we have a 50-page bill before us, and it's really a challenge to wrap my head around the whole thing. So the thought here was not to not address any of these issues, but to separate them out into vehicles that we already have in the General Assembly with other bills. And that way, if we need to have a work group, or at a minimum, the bills could come out at different times during the session, so we'd have more time to work on it, as opposed to all one. If you're going to oppose it, I don't want to have a lengthy debate, but that's what the amendment is.
Well, it cuts out about the first half of the bill, environmental justice, moving to electric vehicle with the state fleet, and a number of other, high efficient, what do they call the buildings? High performance buildings. I think it denudes the bill by about 40 or 50%, and I would urge a red vote.
If I could just make sure everybody understands, the intent is not to get the topic off the table. It was just to put them on other vehicles. I know there's several senators have those bills in with that. So I'm not arguing against what you're saying. I just want to make clear that I'm not trying to just gut this from this session's topic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And from a process standpoint, I also wanted to speak in support of the amendment. When you look at these omnibus type bills where we're trying to basically cover the waterfront, it's breaking them down and looking at other pieces of legislation that have been introduced by other members and working them that way seems just a more effective approach. If we look at what's going on in Judicial Proceedings Committee, where they, instead of having one omnibus police reform, they took, I think, about 12 different bills, if not more, and they're breaking them down. So it just seems, again, a more manageable process. Here we've been the last 3 Friday nights, going right up to it to try to really go through and work through major policy changes, for the state and impacting our constituents. So from a process standpoint, I think it's a more manageable and effective way to do business. Thank you.
Senator, I appreciate the comments, and I've looked at some of the JPR conversation, and I have to say many of those, and some of you served on JPR, are extremely nuanced. The 3 items that jump out here are, should the state start buying electric vehicles, which I don't think is very nuanced. Should we spend any energy or money on environmental justice, which I don't think is very nuanced. And should we pursue high-performance buildings in the state of Maryland? So I guess I see it a little differently, and I think people should speak for or against if they think we shouldn't move to electric vehicles as a state leader and the other issues. If these were so nuanced that I think it's above our ability to analyze and discuss them, I'd be happy to consider it, but I don't think this amendment does that. Roll call, please. Okay, the amendment is defeated, 4 in favor, 7 against. The next, Senator, Council.
The next amendment is on page 6 of the packet. This is amendment number 153023/1 from Senator Carrozza.
There's a second one for Senator Simon Ayer or not?
No, it's just 1 is technical and 2 is the substance
okay.
of striking everything.
Sorry.
So in Senator Carrozza's is likewise, the first amendment is technical, but the second one actually does 2 things. It adds language requiring the state to pay towards the extra cost identified and approved by the Interagency Commission that are incurred in constructing a school to be solar ready in accordance with sort of state cost share provisions. And then it also strikes provisions of the bill that create an exemption from the personal property tax for equipment that is part of certain community solar projects.
Is there a motion, a motion for putting the amendment on the floor? Senator Carrozza moves, and I assume Senator Riley seconds. Nice roll.
You notice I'm not saying much else.
Understood. Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to remind my colleagues, during the bill hearing, we did not have oral testimony. That I recall, we have written testimony from MACO. And from MACO, they talk about supporting with amendments and highlighting the fact that the bill, puts a significant burden on county governments to carry out the new state policy requiring that new school buildings be solar ready. And that would place, as I think we all know, I've heard from all 3 of my counties, the commissioners and the county executives and others, the costly mandate that would be on county governments to design, engineer, and build the new school buildings. So basically, it's a simple amendment. My amendment would require the state to share in the cost of making a school facility solar ready. And again, I'm extremely concerned about the impact locally and would urge my colleagues to support the amendment.
Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Carrozza, just curious, since, so I understand there's a front-loaded cost, and it's hard for local governments and for homeowners even to decide to pony up the money for solar panels. But there is one of the incentives, other than being good, responsible global citizens, is there's a great cost savings afterwards. If you envision the state helping pay for installation, would you envision a repayment to the state when the cost savings are realized?
What I'm most concerned about is that right now, the way this is, the state is basically, they're only paying a certain dollar amount per square foot, and which in its current posture, it's going to leave the counties right now footing the entire cost of the new requirements. And I just, again, I talked to my 3 counties, and again, if you talk across the board with MACO, they can't handle those costs.
So, Senator Carrozza, let me just ask again. If there were to be the creation of a revolving loan fund to help the counties install solar roofs, would you envision then that being repaid so the money would go back to the taxpayers at the state level once the very significant fiscal savings are realized by the counties?
I guess my response would be that would be a policy discussion. I think we should include MACO in that conversation, and I don't know in the development of the bill if that was.
First, let me clear something up. This does not require school systems to put solar panels on their roofs. What the bill says is when these are all new buildings, when the architect develops the plan for the building, he or she should put the HVAC in a way that creates as much space as possible for solar panels. I don't know if this is at all any additional cost, number one. It is only a consideration when the architect develops the plans for the new school. So this is not requiring the school system to put money out for solar. But when they do, the vice chair is absolutely right. The school systems in the county are going to make money, boatloads of money, of paying little or no heat cost, energy cost over what they're currently paying. And there's no requirement in the law that they send the money back to the state. So this is potentially, in the out years, a profit center. This is not a cost center. And the only upfront cost is when the architect is given the specs for the building, it's one more spec for the building. So I think we should understand what this does and what it doesn't do. Senator Carosa.
Well, Mr. Chair, I just go back to the written testimony that MACO submitted that SB 414 would place a costly mandate on county governments to design, engineer, and build new school buildings that could readily accept solar panels. And they're saying that the most effective method would be to require that the state share in the cost of making a school facility solar ready. So that's coming directly from their testimony. And it seems to me if we're going to make major policy changes, which this bill does, that we should factor in MACO's recommendations.
That can guide your direction. MAID, for example, takes no position. They did not oppose this bill. So we have lots of people who send us testimony. We all review all of it, and we make our judgments. Senator Riley.
Now I'll have a quick comment, Mr. Chair. When I read the original bill, it sounded like it was going to cost more to structurally reinforce the building to accept the extra weight on the roof. And you're sharing with us a normally new constructed school already has the strength and infrastructure to have another weight on top of the roof, and it's only moving the heating and air conditioning systems?
Look, I'm not an architect, Senator, so I can't speak to the exact additional costs. And there may be some marginal cost up front, but once they put the panels on, and they don't have to put them on for years, they will get a pretty fast return on their investment because of the lowered heating bills.
Okay.
So,
my last comment on this.
Could there be some structural changes they have to make? There very well could be.
Yeah. And my last observation is, serving on the county council for 7 years, we always had to do a maintenance of effort, a little bit more than we did the year before. And in a sense, this would moderate the amount of operating expenses that the school would receive from the counties, and that's when that long-term benefit would arrive. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Again, just to point out, I think Baltimore City and Howard County have already done some of these green buildings in the last 2 years or 3 years. Okay, roll call on the Carosa amendment. Okay, the amendment is defeated. 4 in favor, 7 against. Next amendment, please. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just the name Mark Kaufman's coming up. I guess I'm assuming that this is public. Can we just name an organization of somebody who's listening in?
From the University of Maryland, is that Mark? Or which Mark?
Bay Commission. He's here for 119, Bay Commission.
He's here for the next bill, actually. He's the Bay Commission, the Gazone bill, which is the next bill we're taking up.
He's the Maryland director of the Chesapeake Bay.
I just think something like that pops up. Thank you.
Next amendment, I believe it's the Ellis Amendment, Committee Council.
So this is on page 7 of your voting packet. This is amendment number 574931/1 from Senator Ellis. We have a series of amendments here. Do you want me to walk through them one by one or all of them at once?
Senator Ellis, you want to take an explanation of one at a time, or go through all of them? It's your call.
One at a time, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, please.
Okay, so amendment number 1 requires the state's greenhouse gas emissions reduction plan to include specific estimates of the reductions that could be achieved through the expansion of transit options in Baltimore City, Central Maryland, Western Maryland, and Southern Maryland.
Is there a motion to put the amendment on the floor? It's been moved. Is there a second? Second. Okay, Senator, you want to speak to it?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this opportunity. Colleagues who I respect greatly and dearly. Greenhouse gas emissions from vehicles on the road are the major cause of pollution entering the atmosphere, greenhouse gases. And Southern Maryland, I know, which I represent, Charles County, has the worst commute in the nation. During normal times, which God willing we'll get back to soon, traffic congestion is there. And in some ways, I'm looking for that returning, but in some ways not after this pandemic. And so I believe that we should, in this omnibus bill, really consider the transit options that will take cars off the road and help in this effort to improve our environment. I know this body, I've found out since I've been here, I'm not anxious to take up transportation issues, but through the Transit Caucus, which I'm an active member in, we are determined to address these issues. And we have members from Western Maryland, Senator Quarterman, and Republicans and Democrats, from urban and rural areas on the Transit Caucus. Most of these areas need transit improvement to really get Maryland citizens off the road to get to work and to get around to play in an efficient manner. But because those options are not there now, our roads are congested. A lot of greenhouse gases are being produced. And I believe that we have to keep this at the forefront of our climate change solutions.
Madam Vice, Senator, were you done?
I'm done, yes, sir, yes.
Madam Vice Chair?
Yeah, I paused for a second. I thought maybe you were done. Thank you, Senator Ellis, and thank you for this amendment. I'm just curious. You have educated us all, I think, about the traffic problems in Charles County and in Southern Maryland, and I really commend you. Your constituents are lucky to have that. I'm just curious. You've added other locations. They're not comprehensive. First off, I want to make sure Central Maryland includes my region.
It does.
Okay, just checking. And you've got Baltimore City, but not Baltimore County, not Hartford, not the Eastern Shore. Are these chosen with a specific strategy, or do you have thoughts about maybe making it a little more generic to talk about gas emissions reduction that could be achieved through the expansion of transit options?
I'm open to that. That's more comprehensive, and you're right about that.
Mr. Chairman, your bill? What do you think?
Well, look, I understand where the senator's going with this, and I'm going to vote for it. I guess I read it. It says transit options. I read into that mass transit options.
That is the way I read it.
And I'm not sure they're going to add a purple line or a metro system on the Eastern Shore or the Western Mountains.
Fair enough.
I thought covering Baltimore City and the D.C. suburbs and the Charles County route, which has been under conversation. So, yeah, Southern Maryland.
But Western Maryland.
I was fine with it, but it's up to the will of the committee.
So, Senator Ellis, I wonder whether we insert the word, this is just my thought, through the expansion of, and per the chairman's comment, insert the word mass, so we're not talking about new roadways and stuff, but insert the word mass, transit options, and then just finish there, so we're not being exclusive?
I'm sorry.
Is that a friendly
Yes, I'm
amendment?
fine with that, yes, ma'am.
The seconder of the amendment, is everyone okay with that concept?
Wait, I want to make sure we're clear.
Please.
I think the vice chair was suggesting taking out the designated regions. Senator, were you fine with that? I just want it to be on the same page so we're all,
I was speaking more from my knowledge of the priorities of the Transit Caucus and the General Assembly. And I know these are some of the priorities of the Transit Caucus. Back 50 years ago, we had train lines running straight through Southern Maryland on the Eastern Shore, and it was everywhere, really. And if it was 50 years ago when traffic weren't this bad, can you imagine, we maybe should look at that as a broad global solution. So I would welcome to be very more inclusive than exclusive. So
with,
reiterate then.
let me have committee counsel, because she's going to have to write this up.
Of course.
All right, so based off of my understanding, it would rewrite this to say, shall include specific estimates of the greenhouse gas emission reductions that could be achieved through the expansion of mass transit options.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that is the amendment. Anybody want to speak to it? Is there any objection to that amendment? If not, it's I'm sorry, Senator. Okay, it's 10-1. The amendment passes, but it's not a recorded vote. I don't think we're recording every amendment. Okay, that's adopted. Next.
Give me just a second. Okay. Amendment number 2 adds representatives to the Just Transition Working Group. Specifically, the amendment proposes to add one representative who is a veteran selected by the Maryland Military Coalition, one representative who is a formerly incarcerated individual selected by the Legal Action Center National Hire Networks, 2 representatives who are women selected by the Women in Technology International Association, and 2 representatives selected by the Maryland State Chapter of the NAACP.
Is there a motion put before us? I assume the response. It's been moved and seconded. It is before us. Senator, if you want to speak to it, you don't have to. You can. I'm not putting anybody on the spot.
yeah, I'll speak to it. And I'll speak to several members about this. We're out of time to speak to everyone, and I apologize for that. In the bill, it talks about the transition, and really this bill is this Senate Bill 414, is a tremendous job creation vehicle for the state of Maryland. And so this section is talking about, the council work group that will discuss the transition and technology transition when it comes to this bill and climate change and jobs. And at the end of this section, it talked about, this work group should pay special attention to the needs of women and veterans and underrepresented groups. So I was like, let's be less paternalistic and let's put these people on the work group intentionally instead of saying others should look out for them. I'm not doubting that they would not, but I want us to be more direct and proactive in making sure all these individuals we say we will pay special attention to are intentionally included on this work group. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first off, I just want to commend the intent behind this amendment. And I do think we want people represented. I do think we want voices in the room. And I do think we want diversity in all government. That's how we make good policies, when lots of people are represented. I have to say, I'm a little, and I know this was not intentional, people being put on a commission, on a working group just because of their gender, just because of their race, I think people should be bringing a lot more to the table, some expertise, I think the list and the diversity of people that are in this or people who work in this area, what I wonder is whether we might be able to come up with something, and I think there's language, Ms. Morton, elsewhere in the code that just says special attention shall be paid, like when people are being appointed, to making sure there is gender, ethnic, professional, socioeconomic, I mean, I think we could list all the ways we want people to be diverse, but I think if we want someone on the panel who has expertise in any of these, construction laborer, an electrical worker, the building and construction trade, they could be women, they could be African American, they could be formerly incarcerated, and we can list that, but having someone on a work group to make it large and therefore a little bit unwieldy to get things done would be of another concern of mine. So, Senator Ellis, I don't know what you think about my comments or thoughts about that.
Okay. Sure.
Let me call on a few other, then you can respond to all of them, Senator, if you want. Let's go with Senator Carrozza, followed by Senator Patterson, followed by Senator Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess what I was doing, I was first trying to cross-check the amendment list, the new members that Senator Ellis would add to who's currently in there, which I guess begins on page 19 of the reprint. Is that correct? So I'm just trying to skim this, and again, just trying to think more so from a balance on the work group. If we're going to start opening this up, I think we might be interested then in probably adding a member from the Maryland Farm Bureau, and there might be some other that if we're going to open this up some. So I just, again, from the standpoint, maybe you can give us an idea of the ones that are already in here, maybe how you came to that balance, Mr. Chair, and then maybe we can see if there's others that should be added to it.
Well, Senator Patterson, let me just do a quick answer to that, and I'm going to jump in front of you and Senator Washington. We have people from the administration who have to oversee programs, and because a lot of this bill deals with the future transitioning from, it's mostly weighted towards construction trades, owners of buildings, labor, who are the ones affected and put out of work, the new clean energy, who can talk about what job creation will take place, apprentice folks, because they can be crucial in preparing people for new jobs. I've added the community colleges because they are a place for retraining. And so that's how I came up with this list. But let me just briefly say, I didn't put this list together to figure who had 12 votes and who had 11 votes. There has to be a very thoughtful, extended conversation of how the state of Maryland deals with a changing economy and how we deal with people who are displaced from their jobs because of this change in policy. This is a stakeholder where we have to look at interest and not my agenda versus your agenda, or we're not going to get anywhere. So I originally had 2 environmentalists, and it was suggested it was too many. I took off one of the environmentalists, which probably didn't make me real popular. So that's what brought this on. Is it the perfect list? No, and I think some of the recommendations from the good senator I'm going to support. I'm not sure I'm going to support all of them, but I think he's got some good ideas after he talked with me, and he got me to reflect on it. So that's how it came to be, Senator. Senator Patterson.
Testing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my question was going to be directly to the Vice Chair. What gives you some discomfort that perhaps we cannot find qualified folks with the expertise among the groups so listed?
For that clarification. The way I read this, Senator Patterson, these were in addition to everyone else. So first off, one of my concerns was that it makes it an awfully large and unwieldy group of people. And second, I think people wear more than one hat. I am a woman, I am a Jew, I am Montgomery County, I am a senator. I have a lot of different boxes that I can check, and I think a lot of other people do. So having two representatives, because they're women and they were selected by the Women in Technology International Association, one person who's formerly incarcerated. If the formerly incarcerated individual is also an electrician, an electrical worker, and the women were also construction laborers, I just think we can get really smart, diverse, effective people that totally fit into these boxes without doing kind of patronizing add-ons that maybe they're not as much value added as they might be if they were. And I'm not saying that for all of these. I just think this is a lot more people, and I just think we can consider asking for the language that's often in other bills, which is when these people are selected, they should be diverse based on, and then the boxes that we want them to check and consider, so that we do end up with a diverse cross-section geographically, ethnically, gender, and all that.
I didn't get that impression from the first question.
Thank you for letting me
thank you for that.
clarify. Sure.
My only other concern, I've seen instances where we pretty well lay out some general duties and responsibility or expertise that we need to serve on a particular board. If you're looking for somebody with environmental experience, you're looking for somebody in the trade and electrical, maybe some type of generic, all that stuff there. Well, maybe I'm going to go back there.
I missed the last part of your sentence, Senator. Could you repeat?
Basically what I was saying, maybe we could define some of the basic qualifications that we're looking for under some of these categories. Something sort of generic. I don't think we need to get too specific. If we got some concerns that perhaps we're not going to find the expertise or get people on the board who cannot do what you want done. That's just my.
That's a question out there that people can address or deal with. Senator Washington.
Thank you for these amendments. But yeah, I'd like to have the conversation. So what happens particularly in this space, and I think why it is worth us for it to be specific. Now, maybe we could work on the wording, is that...
Senator, could you pull the mic a little closer?
Sorry. What happens in this space, particularly in environmental organizations or building trades, that women and people of color just are not represented. And when people look around the table and they see they aren't there, it's sort of after the fact. And so to be specific that we do want gender, race, affected communities, veterans. I mean, we just heard a bill about the concern about engaging veteran-owned businesses. I think that it's worth it to figure out a way that we say, look, we want somebody that has the lived experience of being a veteran, the lived experience of being a formerly incarcerated person, the lived experience of being female-bodied, the lived experience of being a Black American, in addition to the other set of qualifications, particularly when we're talking about these types of issues that all of these populations have been disproportionately impacted. So I don't think there's a problem with us specifically adding people with the lived experience that is based on their identity. And I don't think and I know you didn't intend that, but it never is the case that that's all they offer. But even if it is all they offer, is that they spent 10 years in one of our penitentiaries, and we want some ideas about how to engage people in planting trees, that would be a tremendous value and a point of view and a vision that I could never provide. So I would like an opportunity to let's figure out how to get that in there. But particularly, I think two representatives who are women, I'd cross that out. But maybe the organization is right or something like that. So thank you, Chairman.
Senator Gallion, I will get back to you, Senator, in a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question, well, it's not really a question, more of a comment, kind of comes on the heels of what the Madam Vice Chair said. Some of these groups, I worry you're just getting too many people. So I wonder if some of the other ones could come off, and the ones Senator Ellis recommended, a couple of them could maybe go on. I'm just worried you get this thing up close to 30 people. It just seems like it'd be maybe hard to reach the consensus and stuff. You get that big a group.
I'm going to call myself just briefly. I count 21 right now. I think, is that right?
That's what I have.
And, you know, the Kerwin Commission, which was a 3-year program, had 25, I believe. It was sometimes tough, but we actually broke into work groups. And I think at the end of the day, it worked fairly well. Part of it was having very good leadership with Chancellor Kerwin. Look, the Senator and I sat down, and he got me thinking about the stuff and reflecting, and I think we don't know who the representatives will be in these other categories. And look, the building trades have, in fact, been significantly white, but the transportation unions have been significantly African American. But it raises a legitimate enough concern that I think having to, from the NAACP, makes perfect sense. Now, we might want to put language that says who have been affected or likely to be affected by climate change or greenhouse gas, because the urban environments have been disproportionately affected. So I think just because they're a member of NAACP, I think we ought to put some modest qualifier that will still allow many people to be selected. So, I mean, that makes sense to me, and I'm going to support that. I had a question about the women because it's from the International Technology. And look, I want to build technology in the state, but this was more specific about changing the energy sector from fossil fuel, gas and oil, to geothermal and heat pumps and this and that. So I wasn't sure that made a lot of sense. And, you know, I don't know if the same holds true for having a women's voice or women's view. And I also wasn't, you know, look, a lot of veterans are looking for jobs, and I think they're probably a smart voice in the job creation. You know, look, do we want to have someone who's been incarcerated? Yeah, maybe. But as Senator Carozza said, should we have someone from the Farm Bureau? You know, and again, the Farm Bureau is not very affected by the energy sector. So, you know, we should try to get this as right as we can do it without saying you all come, because then people start to bring their own agendas. And really, the fundamental question we have to address, and this is it's happening across the nation, because right now there are battles that are going on. You know, there's some dirty industry, and some unions are fighting it because they want to keep their jobs, even though it's harming the society. Some environmentalists want to make this change and aren't always as sensitive to working people. So we have to have that conversation. We want to have absolutely the right people in the room, but we also don't want to say, you all come. So it's striking a balance. I mean, that's my view on this.
Point of information.
Okay.
Okay, just super. Are we going to be voting on final passage on this bill today?
We may. Yes.
We may. Okay, because I was going to suggest maybe a few of us chatting.
No, I think we can deal with it.
Okay,
in
all right.
full session. Ellis, but I don't care.
Quick follow-up question. Will that be a rotating plan, or you just going, this is a long-term committee, I think. Maybe there'll be, you know, if some don't get on this round, that's a possibility they could get on the next round, if there's going to be any type of rotation. Maybe it's in here, I didn't see it.
This was not.
It's not set up that way?
We want to force them to come up with some strategies, because it might mean the state might have to act in terms of coming up with money or a plan
Okay.
to help with the transition. So, look,
Okay.
well-intended,
Yeah. Okay.
but you want some continuity. Senator Ellis, back to you for either a near final word or final word, I don't know.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman and colleagues. So, just speaking to some of my colleagues and looking at the issue, like I said earlier, came up with this list, and it wasn't meant to offend anyone. At the same time, I want to say that, say we have 2 representatives that come from the NAACP state chapter. Being a longtime member of the NAACP and an officer in many roles in my district, when these opportunities and outreach come to us as a body, we discuss, we find folks who work in this area, and we assign them to that particular, or we ask them to volunteer in that area, on that board, that issue. So, for instance, in the NAACP chapter in Charles County, we have a health chair, and that's always a health person, a doctor, Lane Ward. And we have education chair. It's always, we look for someone involved in the educational area. So it's not like, just like, okay, just anyone here, come on, please volunteer. We need a warm body. We take our activism serious. And I must say that the national president of the NAACP, Chavis, several presidents ago, he's the one who really came up and pushed the environmental justice issue. He was the origin of that. So the NAACP in Maryland is very immersed in this issue. We can find folks in there and guarantee the NAACP leaders I know, the new president of Maryland, President Flowers, they are conscious, they're involved with these issues, and they are not random people. So I just want to say that. And so, I think, but when we consciously include these groups, then we will get the product we need and the buy-in from the entire state for this really great bill. And with the 2 representatives who are women selected by the Women in Technology International Association, well, I will cede the wording of that to my colleagues to cede to make it just right. And so I'm very open, and thank you for your consideration of being direct with these folks. And I just say with veterans, many veterans are in technology, in the military, in high technology. And when we look for solutions to our climate problems, we want people to come to the work group who can think outside the box, who are not necessarily in the echo chamber of our normal go-to people for ideas and solutions. And I think the product will be great when we really reach out to include a lot of these folks in there. And the members of the military coalition, Maryland Military Coalition, it's like represent 400,000 veterans and families, members in Maryland. They're another vast group of folks who reach out and they find folks who are most involved in these areas to really speak for us as veterans. So thank you for your consideration. We can adjust the numbers. I'm not wedded to the numbers or all of these, but we'll at least love to have at least some of these groups represented. It doesn't have to be 2 from the NAACP. It could be 1 if there's a concern over the numbers. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Let's get down and let's move on here. So before us are these 4 categories. Does anybody want to amend the amendment? I would offer one, Senator. Maybe for the number 17, maybe 2 at-large representatives selected by the governor who are women in the affected industries. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Senator?
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. So I counted out, there's like 8 members of labor, so there's like 4 of ACLU gets 4, AFL-CIO, sorry, I'm used to saying that, AFL-CIO, and then you have the International Brotherhood and but there are organizations of a coalition of labor union women, and again, just to reinforce that the distribution of the industries that we're not going to, it's less likely. So maybe we could find out if there is this coalition of women labor union, or it could be the Women's Commission. Maryland has a state women's commission or something like that. I mean, I don't know. Definitely not the women's.
Let's just settle on this. We're on this particular amendment, Senator Carrozza. It's been suggested alternative language. I just want to lock this down.
Yeah,
I don't
all
want
right.
us to get hung up on it.
Okay.
Before I get to you, Senator Carrozza and Vice Chair, Senator Washington
No, yeah.
so two at-large representatives who are women in the affected industries. So then the question is back down to who selects them. Okay, we've heard three different, we've heard the Coalition Labor Union Women, we've heard selected by the governor, selected by the Women's Commission. Let's just try to lock this down and people can vote for it or against it. Senator Carrozza, then Vice Chair.
Debate about the makeup of the women, I don't think we should narrow it just to women involved with labor. I mean, we have women business leaders as well. So I'd like to see that, more, open that up more. So I certainly don't want to limit the type of women that we would appoint to this.
Let me try and see if there's a consensus here. Two at-large representatives who are women, in the affected industries. I'm fine selected by the governor. I don't want to make this is not meant to stuff votes on. It's to have another, we'll go to the Vice Chair. Anyway, in terms of this amendment to the amendment, any objection or, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We are setting up a quota system with this amendment. This may be intended to be a floor, but it could also function as a ceiling. There's no reason why 21 people couldn't all be women or all be people of color because the women or the people of color or the women of color happen to be electricians or environmental experts or any other thing. By saying we get 2 girls on the panel, I'm sorry, I'm offended by that. I think this is really disappointing. I don't like the way this is going down the road, and I think this is not the way we get the smartest, best people in the room who represent the diversity of our state and the expertise that we want in the room. I'm going to oppose this amendment the way we're talking about it now. I don't like it.
Right on.
Whoa.
I don't know. Somebody like to. Okay. Yes, I get that, and we're resisting tokenism. We're resisting quotas. All of that. But again, my observation of the industries that are so there's what is and what we want to be. So what is there's been many concerns over the years about the lack of diversity, both male and female, in all the commissions in Maryland, in government, in agencies. We've got legislation that, somebody wants to put pictures up because they see, hey, look, there's no diversity. So there's got to be a way for us to say it and make it be very clear. But again, without having the kind of tokenism, or we have 2, so we don't need to have any. And I know you're concerned about it, but the reality is, if you have my understanding of the organizations that are in the bill and their leadership structure. When I went to be interviewed for them as a candidate, I did not see women. I often didn't see people of color. And so there's got to be a way to ensure that. Now, if it's through organizations, which I get that might be an easier way. And unfortunately, I didn't see the amendment, so I don't know so I was looking, Googling, and trying to see labor union. I agree with Senator Croza that women who are working in these fields from the private sector should make sure that they're represented. I don't know if there's professional organizations of business women, but there's got to be a way that we're being self-conscious, or we're being it must look that way, and I don't have the answer for that right now, but I definitely get what you're worried about, but
Okay, we're just going to have to make some judgments soon. Senator Vice Chair.
I don't want to, this bill is a lot bigger than this work group, but the work group is critical to making sure that it works correctly. So we definitely want the right people in the room. And I'm wondering, April, were you able to find the language that is often used about this work group shall, in making the nominations, making the appointments, that it shall, not may, shall represent and reflect the diversity of our residents, including gender, race, geography, professionalism, incarceration status, veteran status. I'm okay with putting those in here as things that should be considered and things that shall be used in reflection. But pick one from column A and two from column B, I don't think is the right way to do this.
Senator, one of the problems is we're not talking about at-large people, but organizations outside of government. We can't tell them who to pick, essentially. And then the first named people are named people or designated secretaries or the designee. So in some of those situations, there are 5 at large or 3 at large, and then we say demographically, gender-wise, et cetera. But I'm not sure we have the leeway or luxury to do that with the makeup of the committee.
I agree. Certainly the Secretary of Labor or the Secretary's designee agreed. And our current Secretary of Labor happens to be a woman. But 4 labor representatives selected by the Maryland State AFL-CIO, 1 representative of energy efficient. There are people that we can ask for diversity. And I don't think we should get 4 white guys from the AFL-CIO. I think we want them to give us a diverse group. I don't think that's unreasonable. But I don't think we want to do a set-aside of we're going to have 2 people from the NAACP who show up as activists and committed members and leaders of the NAACP. Let's make sure that there are labor activists who also happen to be members of the NAACP. That make sure that we've got building and construction people who also happen to be women, who also happen to be small business owners.
Yeah, I just don't think we can tell them who to select from the organizations, Madam Chair, Vice Chair. Okay, the amendment as amended, and people can vote for or against it, that's all. Or amend the amended amendment. This is Amendment 2. 17 has been amended to 2 at-large representatives who are women in the affected industry, selected by the governor. And then I assume the other 3 will stay as they are, unless somebody wants one more shot at amending the amendment. If not, let's do a roll call. Amendments adopted 8-3. Next, please.
Amendment number 3 increases the urban tree planting goal from 500,000 to 2.5 million out of the total 5 million tree goal.
Anybody plan on moving this amendment? Seeing none, that's not moved. Next amendment.
Amendment number 4 requires the Department of Natural Resources to make reasonable efforts to ensure that contractors hired under the bill to assist with tree planting activities reflect the geographic and demographic diversity of the state.
Is there a motion to adopt this amendment? It's been moved. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Discussion? Seeing none, will anybody object to this amendment? Number 4. It's adopted. Amendment 5.
Amendment number 5 requires the Chesapeake Bay Trust, in awarding grants under the Urban Trees Program, to prioritize 1, grant applications from eligible organizations located in the underserved areas where proposed tree planting projects will be implemented, and 2, grant applications that include plans for engaging individuals, organizations, or businesses located in underserved areas to implement and maintain tree planting projects in their communities.
Is there a motion? It's been moved by Senator Washington. Is there a second for this, Senator Riley? Any discussion?
I have a question.
Please.
Senator Washington, was your intent in the language? It says grant applications.
Senator Ellis' amendment. She moved
I'm
it,
sorry.
but it's Senator
I'm sorry.
Ellis's.
Senator Ellis. Sorry. I'm sorry. So grant applications from eligible organizations. Do you envision community groups? Do you envision for-profit businesses? Do you envision nonprofits? And should we clarify what you were thinking about?
That's a defined term in the bill.
Organizations,
Right, so that's a defined term in the bill. So if you look at page, I'm sorry, it should say qualified organization, so that's a good catch. But qualified organization means a nonprofit organization, school, community association, service, youth, or civic group, institution of higher education, county or municipality, or a forest conservancy district board.
okay, so I thought I remembered that, but that's why I wasn't sure about eligible.
You're right, it should
Okay,
be
so
qualified
Okay.
organization.
Right,
you.
and we
Thank
need
you,
to
Senator Ellis.
understand that in some jurisdictions, it might be the county government or the park and planning, or they might have a department that does some of this, but where they do grants to bring on other people, whether in Brandywine or Rockville or wherever, this would come into play. Senator.
Chairman, an excellent question, Vice Chair. And so I had a good meeting this morning with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation and with several groups, organizations, tied, forgive me, it's late. The other groups slipped my mind. But I think the Urban Roots Apprenticeship Program in Baltimore City, lady was on that meeting also, and they plant trees in Baltimore now, and they engage the local citizens. It's just a wonderful program. It's great buy-in by the local citizens. So it's being done now. We want to make sure it continues to be done, not just in Baltimore City, but throughout the state in these urban areas. Because when we have the community buy-in, when the community is involved, they'll take care of their trees. They will name the trees. I'm guilty of that, right? And so basically you will take care of it. So when you have the community members working in this area as their baby, their project, the likelihood for a positive outcome goes up tremendously. So it's being done now. We want to make sure it continue to be done and expand that throughout our undeserved areas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The motion before us, I see no lights on. Will anybody be objecting to this amendment? Seeing none, amendment number 5 is adopted. Next. I'm sorry, as amended. Okay, next set of amendments.
Senator Kagan, do you still want to offer these, or is it covered with the chair's amendments?
I asked you or the chair. So just to be clear, since it's in front of us and there may be people watching, on page 10 of the reprint, this was about making sure that the department, the department had enough charging stations to support the operation of our zero-emission vehicles that in the state vehicle fleet that we are encouraging to procure when our current vehicles expire. So we can't ask them to get electric cars and not be able to charge them. So, Mr. Chair, if you feel like that's been included in yours, then we don't need to offer
I
mine.
think so. Is it 32?
Yes.
Ms. Morton, just direct us.
So on page 32 of the reprint, it's under, between line 7 and lines 8, under the new paragraph 3, the primary procurement units shall make reasonable efforts to install charging equipment on state property under their control. The chair's amendments also add language in the Strategic Energy Investment Fund under the new Climate Solutions account, allowing money from that account to be used for the installation of charging equipment.
Where's the second site?
That's new language added on page 36. So under line 2
Okay.
and under line 19.
We good? Yes. So on page 36, that's about the cost. And I think that's probably valid if that's language you like, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure I love your language on page 32. Under line 7, colleagues, under both number 2 and number 3, it says the state make reasonable efforts to transition, and primary procurement units make reasonable efforts to install charging equipment on state property. I don't love reasonable efforts. I don't think that's strong enough. And, reasonable efforts could end up with not installing any charging equipment, in which case we'd be spending a bunch of taxpayer money on electric vehicles and have no ability to charge them. So on page 10, the amendment that I've got, that April drafted, not to take any credit for the amendment here, the department shall ensure the development of charging infrastructure sufficient to support the operation of zero-emission vehicles in the state vehicle fleet is a heck of a lot stronger than they should try really hard. And then the second part, an evaluation of the charging infrastructure that exists to support the operation of zero-emission vehicles. So you have to do it, and then you have to evaluate it and make sure that it is sufficient. So I kind of like that language better than reasonable efforts. The third part of the amendment that I have here on page 11, the administration shall ensure the development of charging infrastructure sufficient to support the operation of zero-emission buses in the state transit bus fleet. Again, that's a lot better than reasonable efforts. So, Mr. Chairman, I think I'm going to move my amendment. I think it's stronger.
Okay. Is there a second? Second. The Vice Chair has spoken to it. Senator Riley, followed by Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back on 32, in that line 7 area, it talks about transition to the rest of the light-duty vehicles. So we have a very specific schedule for passenger cars. That next number 2 is designed to capture all the other light-duty vehicles without a very specific
Right. This came out of our discussion. This came out of our discussion last week, where we're redefining passenger vehicles as more narrow, and we put very explicit goals and responsibilities there. But we also said, let's not forget the other light-duty vehicles. I assume that means vans and everything else, and we don't put a timeline on that.
Okay.
If you want to,
No,
I'm
no,
sure
that's
we'd
fine,
accept the
that's fine.
amendment.
I like it, just clarifying.
Understood,
This picks up everybody else,
understood.
but
Yeah.
it doesn't address the heavy
No, that's defined separately.
state highway truck, dump trucks.
No.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Cardoza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since we have gone from the language that was in the reprint to Senator Kagan's amendments, and since we have shalls, should we ask about a fiscal note, the cost of that? Do we know?
I don't know. They are working on this now, they claim, and we put later in the bill that they can use money from the C fund to accomplish this. We are not going to wait for a new fiscal note, however. Further discussion. Madam Vice Chair, I'm generally fine with this, but I get a little nervous. I'm generally fine with your language, all three sections of it. I have to say I'm a little nervous of E being used to not do anything because they say we don't have it and we don't want to move forward on electrifying the fleet. So I generally receptive of it. I'm just a little concerned that it's a little overly strong, that's all. And on a report in section 5, I think is perfect sense. And whatever we do in section E, we should replicate in D. And they've already committed to doing 50% of the buses, at least in their most recent statement. So hopefully they're going to have the infrastructure. But
I have a suggestion.
sure.
Deleting one word, the word sufficient. The department shall ensure the development of charging infrastructure to support the operation. So it's better than reasonable efforts, but it doesn't say,
Anybody
do you think?
object to that amendment? Okay. Then the Kagan amendment would be adopted, and line 7 on page 32, number 3, would come out. People clear on it? Anybody object to that amendment? Seeing none, the Kagan amendment, which includes the striking of number 3 under line 7 on 32, is adopted.
What about reasonable efforts on number 2? We're keeping that?
Yeah, no, I assumed it was both.
Yes, that's what I was,
Yeah.
okay, checking. That wasn't what I,
That's all one amendment.
got it.
Okay,
So paragraph 2 is staying. That's not changing. That's
correct.
That's
Only number 3, line 3, or I'm sorry, 3 in parens will come out,
right.
and that'll be replaced by E.
Right.
And then Roman number 5 will be placed in the appropriate place, and D, without the word sufficient, will be placed in the appropriate place.
Yes.
So then, so number 2 under line 7 on page 32 stays.
Correct.
Okay, so reasonable efforts there?
That's for the transition of the rest of the
I
vehicle
understand,
fleet.
but we're okay with reasonable efforts?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. Next set of amendments. I saw no objection to that, so I just adopted them. Riley amendments on page 12, Senator Riley.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Amendment 1 and 2 have been addressed with your changes. I'd like to focus on Amendment 3.
Okay, can we have the committee council
Sure.
explain it?
So this is Senator Riley's amendment, beginning, so all of his amendments begin on page 12, but we're focusing on amendment number 3, which starts on page 13 of the voting packet. Amendment number 3 would allow MTA to acquire alternative fuel or zero-emission buses, rather than the bill right now says that it's requiring them to only acquire zero-emission buses.
Mr. Chair, I'm concerned that we won't have enough reliable long-distance transit buses to meet the requirement. So I'm trying to also give the alternatives of less pollution than diesel, but not all electric. But I don't want to change the goal of 100% by a certain date. I'm just trying to give an alternative during this transition because, as we talked about the electric grid, reliability of transit vehicles is critical. There's been some spotty stuff, and I just want to make sure that we have the ability to have reliability built in. That's my purpose for the amendment.
Okay, and I'm going to move, it's been moved and seconded, so it's in front of us. Discussion on Riley's amendment. I have a question, and I'm sorry, Senator Freihester.
Question two. Oh. So where do hybrid vehicles fall? Is that?
I think the hybrid issue was removed, and I don't know if it was removed by your amendment, but we asked about that, and because it's still tied to a carbon engine, it didn't necessarily meet his goal. So hydrogen, liquid natural gas are the types of vehicles that I'm suggesting we keep on the table, again, for reliability.
Senator, I think even the commission has moved away from hybrid engines. Some of us have them, but they want to look 2, 5, 10 years, and the market's growing on electric. Discussion. Senator, the one thing I have a question about, as I mentioned, the administration has committed to 50%. I don't think it's enough, but that's a separate issue. And I can't remember if their commitment was to all electric buses or if they said alternative fuel buses.
I can't answer that, Mr. Chair. This is based on I've been assigned by my Republican peers to kind of look into this, and I tried to share some of the data that I found. Some of the electric buses in Montgomery County, Philadelphia, and New York are having growing pains. And again, when you're asking a system for reliability, they have to have some backup plans. And again, I'd rather have a alternative fuel than the diesel alternative. So that's why I offer it.
I'm sorry, Madam
Chairman, just a quick question for the sponsor. Would your amendment allow the state to purchase these new vehicles, or would it just be that it could be counted and used in lieu of until we get more of them?
I don't know the technical answer to that. I don't know if legal counsel does.
So rather than buying a new bus from column A, the ideal, column B is like second best, would this enable or allow people to purchase kind of the less ideal but better than what we've got now option, new?
What this would say is it would put alternative fuel buses on the same footing as zero emissions buses and say you'd have to purchase one or the other, but it could be either.
But April, we're not moving the final goal.
Senator,
Yeah.
let me offer a compromise.
Sure.
If we said, if the mandate to transition to all electric buses cannot be fulfilled, the administration can consider alternative fuel buses that are not diesel or gasoline.
I'm all for that. Because we just don't want to commit to, 100 buses and then find out they're out of service 3 or 4 months of the year, and we need that reliability. So I'm fine with that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Any objection to the friendly amendment to the Riley amendment? Seeing none, do you feel comfortable enough to move with that? Okay, seeing no objection, that is adopted. Next amendment.
Yeah, but give me a second to catch up with you. that might,
I have one.
oh, yes, so you have,
I have one that was just developed at 12 or 1 o'clock today. We have a section in the bill that allows school systems for the one school they select as net neutral in carbon to go to a state bank that we put aside money for a loan, a no-interest loan, actually, which Senator Gallion actually raised issues about it, which I thought were pretty thoughtful. Anyway, what this amendment says is the term, they have to pay it back either when they've realized the savings that were enough to pay for it and they send that money back to the bank, or 15 years, whichever is sooner. So in other words, I borrow $250,000 to put solar panels on the roof of new school. I go to the bank, I borrow $250,000. 8 years later, they've saved enough money from their energy bill to make up the $250,000, then they return it to the bank. If it takes longer, that's fine, but it can't take longer than 15 years. And from my discussions, 6 to 10 years is probably the timeline that I've heard from schools that have done this. So it's just to put a cap on it and keep money in the bank for future schools. So that's all it does. Any discussion, any objection? Then if not, it's adopted. It is before us. Discussion. Senator Gallion.
Thank you. We talked about this briefly, and a little more discussion, I think, before we vote would be good. Where are the monies coming from to pay for these different things? And we talked a lot about the Bay Restoration Fund. This bill calls for $15 million to come out of that fund? Yes. Okay, so I know we're not dealing with the next bill on the voting list yet, but that also is requiring a certain amount of money out of that fund, correct? Yes. So I can't remember. Do you know how much is required from that bill? Another 15 or 10? 20. So now we're up to 35. So can we just clearly know what projects will not be funded if these two bills basically bump in line in front of other projects that would have been funded?
Well, I'm going to give a short answer, then I can send it to the committee council. Every year, originally the priority was major wastewater treatment plants, and then minor wastewater treatment plants, and then lots of other projects. They have completed the majors, and they're still working on the last couple of minors, as I understand it. Every year, there are applications, close to 100, I think, maybe more, and they never fulfill all of them. In some cases, some jurisdictions are under court order that they have to change it, their wastewater or their sewer program, and whether they get the money or not, they're mandated to make the changes. So every year, a lot of projects are not included. It is also my understanding that, I hate to call it return on investment, but if you compare trees as a filter and catching stuff before it goes into streams, rivers, and bays. In many cases, and I can't tell you 50, 70, 90%, I can't tell you, but in a large number of the cases, if not a majority, it captures more nitrogen, phosphorus, and runoff than do repairing some of these sewers. So, you know, and the point I raised, and I'll stop, Senator, is that this tree issue is a twofer. It helps clean up the bay, and that's why it's the Bay Restoration Fund. And it's always been an important issue from the people working along the bay, and it also captures carbon dioxide. So the state benefits in two different ways. So
I just have a concern that there's like $500 million request for this every year, and you add in another, I don't know if you call it a mandate, but you know, it's kind of going ahead in the line of what we said, 35, whatever it was, that there are going to be these different local projects that potentially will not be funded because of the money coming in for these two. So that's a concern for me in some of these areas. I got one email that said now that City of Fruitland could lose $1.5 million for a project that would have helped with flooding, erosion, structural issues. Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission could lose $650,000 for a project that will repair, replace, rehead sewers and manholes. And City of Cumberland, 70-inch parallel pipeline from mill race to combined sewer overflow storage. So I look at a lot of these local areas are going to be hurt by this funding that they maybe would have received but now are not because these two bills are going to go in line in front of them. Thank you.
yeah, and Senator, the operative word was may. I mean, we don't know if the department would have approved their projects for other reasons. We just don't know that. That's all.
My understanding, these are FY22 proposed projects that would be would have been impacted. So other projects that I didn't list down the road, we may or may not, but I think these would have definitely been impacted.
The bill's amended. Senator Fry Hester.
So I've been trying to understand this fund and the way we fund things for the past 3 months, and it's really complicated. And so I was on the call where we talked about this issue. And I want to say that I really think that we need to move forward with this climate change issue. I think we should flag for B&T that if there are things that are not getting funded that are priority, they should look at how we could fund those projects. Because my understanding from my conversations with Robin is that there's a return on investment for these different things, and that they're trying to move towards the highest return on investment to protect the bay. But I mean, I really, my heart goes out to these issues where there's sewer overflowing, and so I just think I support the bill. I think B&T should look at the funding stuff.
Duly noted. Senator Gallion mentioned the next bill, which is from the chair of Budget and Tax, which also pulls money from that very same fund. And I would also point out one other item. Over the last 10 years, and it predated numbers of people, acceptable projects that could be applied for have been added. So in other words, it was not a stagnant definition. In the first couple of years, it was major wastewater treatment plants, which were tens of millions of dollars and ate up all of it. But they've been taken care of, so there's more money available for smaller projects. Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Some of us have been playing catch up on this bill from the very beginning, and so appreciate the extra time that we've taken to go through it. Although Friday nights after a long week, sometimes we're not at our best, not at our best work. But I think as a result of the back and forth, you went and took some of those concerns and worked with the departments with your amendments that address some of those, and that's appreciated. When we had the hearing, and again, it's COVID-19 and we're under, Zoom hearings. So, we didn't have the usual thorough vetting of testimony, both, at least on the opposition side that we normally would have. We had one oral presenter opposing the bill. And so it really then became a matter of not only trying to understand what was in the bill, and as you said, to make sure, you understood why the recommendations were being made, but then also trying to play catch up and understand, where the opposition was coming from. So I think there's been a good faith effort to try to, number one, really understand what's in the bill, go back and forth. You've come back with the amendments. I think your amendments address some of the concerns. But overall, what we didn't change, and, is that we still have these, the years stay in place and the percentages stay in place. And when you go back and talk to those who did express concerns from the beginning, and we had some amendments. I thought Senator Gallion had a very reasonable amendment on going from, I think it was from 2045 to 2050, and that was rejected. And part of this is what is realistic, what is attainable, what is the cost, and so as I went back through trying to look back through it. It seems to me we still have significant concerns, whether it's coming from our county governments, whether it's coming from the private sector, whether it's even achievable. So, I just, again, and it was one of the reasons why I supported Senator Simon Ayers' amendment to try to break this down and work with it in smaller pieces, thinking that's probably more achievable and more realistic. So, again, I want to, appreciate the back and forth and trying to work on it, but my concern is that we have a bill that's just unrealistic and not achievable.
Just briefly. I saw some of the amendments you put in after talking with the department and some other groups, and I think they were good and appreciate that. Do we know where, and this is a serious question, do we know where the departments stand on the bill as amended?
I do not. I know because of this bill, they released their climate plan that's been over a year late today. They've incorporated some things that we have done and they've read in my bill, but I have to tell you, I've only had about 20 or 30 minutes to look at it. But it's woefully short in specifics, which has been my frustration all along. So they have not said if they support or oppose, but as you know, many departments only send letters of information. I know they have forwarded amendments to some people here. I have privately asked for anything to make the implementation easier, opposed to policy differences. But if there are things they said, if you do it this way, it would be better than this way, I have not received them. So I can't tell you where they're going to be on this. I guess when it gets to, if and when it gets to the House, I don't know if it'll be another letter of information. My guess is they're going to say they've taken care of it in their plan, but I see a lot of shortcomings in the plan. So I don't have a definitive answer, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Procedurally, now this bill will go over to BET, and we're going to crack at what changes they might make. Will they just
Yeah, not to the whole bill. I mean, to the financial parts of the bill. They will either endorse or make suggestions, and if they make suggestions, it comes back to us. Okay. Is that right?
Right.
Let me just say on the overall bill, I'm not happy about this bill, but I sense the time to put something in place that will ensure that we protect the environment. But I think we missed some golden opportunities to stick in some other things that would have been beneficial to people that don't have a voice and people who need some relief when it comes to gases as well and other type things. So I'm doing it. I'm going to vote for it reluctantly, but I have to just put it out here and tell you I'm not pleased because I just think we did not, in my opinion, reach and dig down in the weeds sufficient enough to look at other aspects of the environment as well.
Okay, the bill as amended passed the committee 8-3. It will now go to Budget and Tax Committee for review of the financial items. If they make changes, it will come back to EHE. We're going to try to catch one more bill before we leave, and that's Senator Gazone's bill, which has been referred to a couple of times today. What's the number? 119, which we heard about 2 weeks ago.
Senate Bill 119, Clean Water Commerce Act of 2021. This bill reauthorizes and modifies the Clean Water Commerce Act through June 30th, 2030, and requires the Maryland Department of the Environment to transfer $20 million annually from the Bay Restoration Fund wastewater account to the Clean Water Commerce Fund, a new special fund established by the bill. The fund must be used to purchase environmental outcomes to help the state achieve the Chesapeake Bay total maximum daily load. The bill establishes requirements for the provision and verification of environmental outcomes, among other things. The department may adopt implementing regulations. There are amendments in your packet, beginning on page 15. Is there amendment number 713626/1? I've also included a reprint of the bill in your packet because the amendments sort of touch a bunch of different parts. So the amendments first throughout use it sets up an account rather than a fund structure to administer the program. This was based, I believe, off of testimony or feedback that they got from the Department of the Environment that they'd rather have a sub-account within the Bay Restoration Fund rather than setting up a totally new special fund. It adds a representative from the environmental justice community to the Bay Restoration Fund Advisory Committee. This is on page 30 of the voting packet if you want to look at the reprint. It also focuses the environmental outcomes that may be purchased under the bill on nitrogen reductions. Phosphorus and sediment reductions would be treated as co-benefits. It's under primarily page 31 of the reprint. Also on page 31 of the reprint, it includes afforestation and reforestation in the definition of natural landscape practices that may be funded. For the agricultural set-aside, for the use of this account, it makes fixed natural filter and ditch management projects priorities. That's on page 32 of the reprint, or of the voting packet. For the environmental justice set-asides, it specifically mentions stormwater and green infrastructure projects as eligible projects. This is on page 33 of the voting packet. For the non-agricultural set-aside, it specifically mentions consideration of upstream conditions, also on page 33. Requires all projects to have an expected beneficial life of 10 years. This is on page 32. It allows for projects to include components from all three set-asides. In other words, it allows blending. So on page 33. It changes the information to be included with each proposal, such as details on co-benefits and outstanding funding. This is, begins on page 35. It expands co-benefits to include climate mitigation, also on page 35. It encourages third-party non-public funding to achieve project goals, also on page 35. It allows the department to use an existing registry for public notices rather than requiring them to set up a new registry. That's on page 38. And finally, it requires an evaluation of set-aside percentages as part of the 2025 annual report. This is on page 40 of the voting packet.
Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know I could Google this, but I'm guessing I may not be the only one. On page 31 of the reprint, page 7 of 15 on the bill, after line 4, agricultural practice includes agricultural, horticultural, silvicultural, and aquacultural. Can you please define silvicultural so we know what we're voting on?
Forestry, I believe. Trees, yeah.
Trees.
Trees.
Thank you. I'll have to see if I can ever play it in Scrabble. Thank you.
Okay, in terms of context, and I'll call you in a moment, Senator Carrozza. Senator Gazone is on the Chesapeake Bay Commission, which is a multi-state organization, along with some other legislators and former legislators. Former Senator Mac Middleton is on it. There are a couple of delegates on it, and another senator, Senator Elfreth. And this came out of the commission and the requirement to be able to meet our total TMDL, total maximum daily load requirement set by the federal government. So that's the genesis of this. We frequently have had Ann Swanson, who is the executive director of the Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia Commission. And that's where these ideas came from. And there was no opposition. There were some testimony with amendments, but there was no opposition. Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and that summary was extremely helpful. I just wanted to ask, just for clarification, on the amendments that we just went through, were these all sponsor amendments, and were there any amendments beyond the sponsor amendments that's included in this reprint?
Came from the sponsor, but I believe they were consensus amendments that the sponsor sort of developed in working with the commission and the various interest groups.
And no other amendments beyond the sponsor amendments?
Correct.
Thank you.
I had Senator Ellis, then Senator Simonaire.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm sitting here trying to calmly finish my week in Annapolis, and I see this bill, and my calmness is going away. So I'll try to ask for us to hold this bill so I can read it and digest it and share my thoughts early next week. My mental capacity is not there to grasp everything in this bill. It's significant, and I just ask for a hold on this for me to understand it for a bit.
We're still early in session. I said every bill gets one hold. If you have a question, we can take that. Yeah. Okay. That's fine.
Thank you.
Please.
So I can review it. So on page 31, I think I heard you say there was amendments, and I see it's on line 7 through 13. It appears, just from first glance, it only amends it to only be nitrogen load reductions. Before it had phosphorus and sediment load. What was the reasoning of taking 31 of the packet? So it looks like the amendment just limits it to nitrogen load reductions, whereas the original bill came in nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment load. So what was the reasoning behind just limiting it to nitrogen?
And I think Mark Hoffman from the Bay Commission is on the call, so he might be able to answer this better than I can. But my understanding is that that's where the most reductions still need to happen is in nitrogen, and so they want that to be the focus of how this money is used. Phosphorus reductions and sediment reductions would be treated as co-benefits. So if you propose a project that reduces nitrogen, but then also has the benefits of reducing phosphorus and or sediment, that would be sort of, ticks in its favor, but they want to make sure that it has at a minimum nitrogen reduction.
Okay.
Mark?
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes. Did you hear the question?
I did indeed, thank you, yes. That was a recommendation from, we had a work group with a diverse set of membership, and the biggest lift to achieve the TMDL is nitrogen, and that is really what we're struggling to achieve. So there was a consensus that we should focus this funding on achieving those nitrogen reductions. Phosphorus and sediment are included as co-benefits, so they are still included, but they have a slightly lesser role and impact on project selection. Thank you.
So if I could follow up on that.
Please.
On the original bill, it came in with those three objectives. Did the rest of the plan get amended to compensate that you're primarily looking at nitrogen now?
I'm sorry, Senator Simon, I didn't fully understand your question.
So the way I understand the bill is it sets up these environmental outcomes, and it says what you can do and defines the projects. And initially it was based on those three, nitrogen, sediment, and phosphorus. And we amended it just to be nitrogen to focus on that. So my question is, are the projects, have they been altered in the amendments to focus on nitrogen as well to make sure we're targeting them?
Yeah. What will happen is if projects are submitted, once this is implemented, there would be an evaluation done. So that evaluation would score projects with large nitrogen reductions higher. And while phosphorus and sediment reductions would still count, but they would be co-benefits. They would count less than the nitrogen reductions, because the goal was to maximize the cost effectiveness of the projects to achieve the TMDL.
Okay, last question.
Last question.
So the other thing is, the Bay Restoration Fund? I'm not sure of the specific goals from that, but I would imagine they would also target, critical area, buffer area, and things close to our waterways. Will these projects that are mentioned in here be focused on those areas, or will they be focused on tree planting in Western Maryland, or how's that work?
The goal is to clean up ultimately the main stem of the Chesapeake Bay. So the projects that have a greater impact and are effectively closer to the main stem of the bay would effectively be favored because they would have a greater impact. So I think that answers your question. But anything in the watershed or in the state would potentially be eligible, but it would have to compete on the basis of cost effectiveness and the co-benefits.
And as we will be told, if we don't know, Garrett County actually dumps into the Mississippi and not into the Chesapeake Bay.
Rainfall, does that bring nitrogen down?
Yeah, and again, nitrogen and phosphorus and sediment, mostly coming from agriculture, from urban runoff, and a couple of other categories, are the problems that have polluted the bay and removed oxygen and increased algae blooms and killed off some of the fish. So that's why we're trying to do this, and have been working on it for 25 years. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. We're going to hold the other bills till next week. We go in session 6:30. Now, Senator Lamb, have you scheduled a subcommittee on the mold bill? The Fafsa bill, I realized, I said we'll send to subcommittee, has not been heard yet in the Senate. So I feel a little funny having the work group meet before we have the bill hearing. So that's on the agenda yet. I'm sorry? It hasn't been heard in the Senate, I don't believe. It has not. I think maybe this coming week. Yes, sir. I was hoping to plan to have education subcommittee on Monday, but that would precede the bill hearing, and I want to wait. Okay, other announcements.
Just a very quick thing. It was referenced that we're all about planting trees. We are the committee that deals with the environment. We only did the first one bill on this. Maybe we can all try to save our voting list and reprint packet and have it with us for our next voting session.
There'll probably be an updated one. Thank you all, and try to get some rest and de-stress over the weekend.